Jurisdiction is a big cause as to why anyone can make a claim, regardless of whether it's a criminal or civil matter, regardless of how serious it is, regardless of whether you've been damaged or you anticipate the damage to which you're trying to prevent. You have to show that jurisdiction exists. Generally speaking, jurisdiction splits into two forms. Besides the whole in rem and personal jurisdiction, besides subject matter, territorial, and personal jurisdiction, jurisdiction splits into two more forms, which is something called primary jurisdiction and supplemental jurisdiction. Supplemental jurisdiction is anything that's relating to the original act that caused you to bring the claim. And usually supplemental jurisdiction is applicable in federal jurisdictions, whereby you go to a federal court and you start to make your claims. Federal laws or federal statutes, meaning the Constitution and all the other public laws that are later codified into the United States codes, are primarily heard on the federal level. Now, we all know that the state has their own public law, their own state constitution, etc. What if you're now bringing state claims, such as civil rights claim on the state level? It's just like there's a 42 USC on a federal level. There's also a civil rights claim on a state level. So, for instance, in New Jersey, they call it restraint, which will show the damages. Because if you're just trying to say, hey, you violated the Fourth Amendment, so pay me $50,000, they're going to say, okay, which law says that they can pay you $50K? Hence, you stated no claim upon which relief can be granted. At that point, they're just going to throw you with a 12B6 brick. They're not going to say, look, what you need to do is show. That means you're not just going to bring in a state law and try to tether it to a federal one just because you say you can do it. It really has to be related, such as the example we gave during the earlier portion of this video. And this is how they can throw a supplemental jurisdiction claim at. But before we read this, I'll just give a regular summary in a regular everyday man's word, which is as simple as this. If that federal law or that federal claim that you're making that the supplemental jurisdiction is tethered to, if that federal law gets thrown out, then the supplemental jurisdiction dies also, because the supplemental jurisdiction is standing upon the rock of the federal one. And this is how they describe it in legalese. The district court may decline to accept as true the fact alleged in Walton's complaint, meaning her claim is right, but you will end up seeing that the way she brought said right and said claim. What's the problem as to how this case was thrown out? Late one night, workers from an unidentified removal company entered Walton's property and without her consent cut down a tree. 2 days later, members of her own homeowner association and employees of a security company came onto her property again without her permission and installed a security camera. In doing so, Walton alleged they were acting as a quasi-governmental agency. Let's pause here for a moment. When you look at these acts that were done, you don't need to be a genius to know that this is not right and this is against privacy. It's common sense. But this is where she went wrong. In doing so, Walton alleged they were acting as a quasi-governmental agency. Many people use this word too. But see, the moment you use this word in a suit, when you bring a claim against someone, you're saying that if they're not governmental agency, which is what quasi means you're really not it, but you're still somehow tiptoeing. And the presumption is basically you're not. So if you're not a governmental agency and you bring in a 42 USC claim, a 42 USC claim is not designed to be brought against private parties. A 42 USC claim is meant to be used against the quote governmental agency, which is where she basically bit her own tongue. Because she claimed that the people that came on her property were acting as a quasi-governmental agency. That is where the issue is, and you'll see. Walton alleged they were acting as quasi-governmental agency by collecting information on her and sharing it with state and local police agencies. She further asserted that most of the defendants, like her, resided in Indiana. It's not that she's wrong with this. These people are probably not even governmental agencies. But if you can show that they contract with them properly, or at least allege that they were, quote, conspiring, that's why that word conspiracy under the color of law is implemented into 42 USC, but she did not invoke that. She did not invoke that. But more importantly, by using this specific term, she is insinuating that she wants to sue someone privately, where 42 USC 1983 is not designed to hold people privately liable. Do you see what is going on? There's a lot in between the line that needs to be said, that they did in fact mention. So listen, Walter sued Tree Service Unknown, the homeowner association, some of its members, as well as security company and several of its employees. She contended by installing and maintaining a camera on her property without her consent. The defendants violated her rights under the 4th, 5th, 9th, and 14th Amendment. She added that the defendants encroached on her rights under state law when they trespassed on her property and installed a camera to surveil her. The defendants in two groups moved to dismiss the complaint. The district court learned from people's mistakes. Walton also fails to demonstrate that the court should have retained supplemental jurisdiction, which is what we began with by explaining. When all federal claims are resolved short of a trial, a presumption favoring requirement arises. In other words, if you notice throughout the state, they said absolutely nothing about her rights being violated or not violated. They didn't even touch that because they know she's right. But the how and why of that right that she says is being violated is where she messed up. Learn from these mistakes. This is a very, 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 very powerful thing that can make or break your case. Into jurisdiction is the operation to which the rights that you're saying you have based on a state or federal constitution can be enforced, especially if you're using the federal court. But before we leave, what if you're in a state court and you bring in federal jurisdiction? Well, the same thing. The complete 37-minute video is on the Patreon page. Take care. Best of luck.